Got messed up again. But I'm going to tell you what this thing says. In 1950, this year is supposed to be 1950. Let's go back. In 1950, the average income per year was $3,193. But check this out. The average mortgage payment in 1950 was $57 a month. Who would like a $57 a month mortgage, right? But in 2025, the average income is 97,000 and the average mortgage payment is 5,200 a month. I mean, the average income has gone up a little bit, but the average mortgage payment has gone up a lot. But what's really crazy, I wish these numbers were better, is if you look at what happened since 2020, since where the average mortgage payment was 2,900 to 2025 it's 5,200. So the average mortgage payment has almost doubled in the last 5 years. And that's just inflation at work, right? But if what you notice before that is the numbers just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And sometimes people say, well, I'm going to wait for the numbers to get better, or I'm going to wait because the payments are too high, or I'm going to wait until the interest rates go down. But it's wild, right? Because it doesn't seem to be getting any easier to buy a house. I don't know if any of you have noticed that, but I always think of this. Back in 2015, I used to think, man, I wish I bought a house in 2010 when homes were cheaper. Look, the median home price in 2010 was 305,000. But then I think back in 2015, I used to say, man, I wish I bought a house in 2010. But then when I think back at 2020, when we were all locked down from COVID, I used to think, man, I wish I would have bought a house in 2015 when they were cheaper. And then today in 2025, I think I wish I would have bought a house in 2020 when they were cheaper. And if this has ever happened to you, let me know in the chat. Because what's crazy is that I'm 100% sure that in 2030, I'm going to be saying, I wish I would have bought a house in 2025 when it was cheaper. Right? And again, sometimes people think, well, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait. But I feel like the more I wait, the harder it gets. Can anybody like resonate with that? Does that make sense to you? Or have you thought of that? Or am I the only one that has those crazy thoughts? Let me know in the chat if that makes sense uh, on the prices. Anyone? This has to be the quietest chat we've had in a long time. All right, Lorena, thank you for participating. All right, if you can't participate, it's totally cool. If you're driving, it's very cool. But if you could participate, I really appreciate it. Maria, you found the chat. Thank you. Thank you. Maria said earlier she couldn't find it. Pedro says yes. All right, y'all found the chat. Thank you very much for participating and playing along with me. Just flatter me a little bit. Let me know you're paying attention. All right. If I put you to sleep or if I'm boring you, please let me know. My goal is to be like super entertaining and give you a lot of information. I know this is kind of like a downer thing, right? Because we're all thinking we wish we bought houses 5 years ago or maybe 10 years ago. But fortunately, we're gonna make that happen. So you've been to my workshops before and you've heard this story, but I share this story to kind of make a point. But for me, when I was a kid, my family moved around a lot. My dad was kind of unstable, and we were always moving from place to place. And what that did is it took me from one school to the next, and I was always moving schools in the middle of the year. And what that did for me is it caused me to always fall behind in school to the point where we thought I was a little slow or maybe a little dumb, right? But at one point, I was almost even held back in school because I was just so far behind of moving all the time. And when I was in eighth grade, my mom bought her very first house. And it was the very first time where we had some stability. I actually went to school for a full year at the same school, and it turns out that I'm actually kind of smart. But home ownership for her gave me the stability that I needed to catch up in school. It helped a lot with my education, and it helped a lot with like my entire future, right? So I always say buying a house gave us a different future. And I've spent the last 23 years of my life helping people do the same. But what's really cool is that in the last 23 years, I've seen some really cool stories. And I'm going to share three stories of people. And what I want you to do here is I want you to think which of these goals or which of these plans would be the ideal for you? Like, which one would you want to do? The first one is my client, Maria. She's what we call a one and done. She bought her house in 2002. She made every payment she could make. Every time she got a tax refund, she paid it. She sent it to the mortgage company. Anytime she got a bonus, she sent extra money and she paid off her house in 2018. And today she's debt free and exactly where she wants to be. The second example, so that's going to be A, right? And if you want to be A, just put in the chat A. But listen to the other two. The second example is my client Tanya. She was a single mom when we did her first deal. She bought a starter condo in Carson. She only put 3.5% down. We use this government program that allowed her to only do 3.5% down. And she lived there for a couple of years. She got a ton of equity in the condo. And then she sold it. And when she sold it, she took that equity and bought the next house. She lived in that house for a couple of years, built up some equity, then she sold that house. And then she did that again 3 more times. But in 2017, she got her dream home. Today, she lives in a house that's worth a little under $2 million in the city of Cerritos. Now, she didn't want any other houses. She didn't want to pay one off. She wanted her dream house with a beautiful pool and like all of those things that were her dream house. Not bad for a single mother, right? So that's option B. If you want to trade up to your dream house, you can put option B in the chat. And then option 3 is my client Ryan. He's been really smart. But check this out. The first property he bought, it was so bad. We had to do this loan called an FHA 203K. And what these loans do, the FHA 203K, is it actually lends you money if you're buying a fixer-upper to fix up the house. And his, we couldn't finance it because it needed a lot of work, but he bought 4 units using that FHA 203K. Then a few years later, he bought another triplex and then another fourplex. And then he bought his first house where he lived. And then he rented his first house. And meanwhile, all of these tenants are paying the mortgages down for him. But get this, today, the guy collects close to $25,000 a month net. That's money that just goes in his pocket after paying the mortgage, all the bills, everything else. He bought his house last year, $2.2 million is his house where he lives. And most of the payments for his house are being made by the rents of the tenants, right? So imagine if you have $25,000 in income every month, it's $300,000 a year. And with that, you can buy your absolute dream house while the tenants pay for it. So let me know in the chat. Ideally for you, would you like to be A, B, or C? Would you like to be like Maria, who just buys a house, one and done, and it's all good? Any of these are good. Or would you like to be like Tanya, who does a dream house and just trades up to the dream house? Or would you like to build like an empire like Ryan, where he just has all of this income? Imagine 25,000 bucks a month. That's like having 2 jobs full time and still making it happen, right? So let me know in the chat, A, B, or C. Let's see what we got. So Janita says C for me. All right, let's go. C is good. Uh, Erica says C, so I can buy my dream home. Angeline says C. Samuel says A and C. And Christina says C. There's a lot of C's, a lot of you investors here. Lorena says, I just want to relax, so A. I'm good with that too. And Pedro says C. Yep. So whichever one of these options you want to get, my goal for this workshop is to give you information that will allow you to get started. Whether it's A, B, or C, the goal is to get you started so that you can be on track for those goals. Is that fair? So let's get started. With everything that we've seen so far, like people have done some really cool things. People have also made some huge mistakes. And I've seen that happen when they buy houses. But one of the things that I've noticed is that there's 3 secrets that I'm going to share with you today that will make it better. The goal for this workshop is to help you prepare yourself to buy a house, right? Help you do the things that are going to save you the most amount of money. And the first thing we want to do is we want to know when to negotiate. I have notes that I keep here. Sometimes I forget to look at the notes. I get excited. But I'm going to try to stay on track here. Cool. All right. So the first secret that we're going to go over is understanding when to negotiate. And this is simply understanding, you've probably all heard people say it's a buyer's market or it's a seller's market. But what does that really mean, right? So whenever it's a seller's market, it means that there's a lot of buyers available, but not a lot of homes for sale. This is kind of like what we were doing during COVID. And I don't know if you know anyone who bought a house during COVID. It was rough. People were offering for like when you saw a house for sale, they were offering 20, 30, even like 60, $70,000 more than the house was listed for. And in some cases, people were paying more for the houses than the appraisers were saying the houses were worth. So imagine if the appraiser says the house is worth 700,000 and you say, I'll pay 750 for it. And that's what was happening during COVID because it was a seller's market. Sellers ruled. They had houses and people wanted houses, so they took advantage of it, right? Now, you might think, well, who would be silly enough to do that? Well, all those people that were silly enough to do that today have a ton of equity because the market went up so high, so fast, right? So even with that crazy seller's market that we had, I still wish I would have bought a house in 2021 because it was such a good appreciation that we've seen. The opposite of that is what we call a buyer's market. And during a buyer's market, there are a lot of sellers, but not a lot of buyers. And when that happens, sellers kind of discount their houses, right? Because they want to attract the buyer. So we want to understand what type of market we're in. The market that we're in today is kind of a balanced market where it's not really a seller's market and it's not really a buyer's market. In some areas, it's a little bit more competitive where you have to bid up. And then in some areas, it's a little bit less competitive when you can get deals. But there are some exceptions to this, and I'm going to tell you like some really cool tricks. If you want to get a lower price than whatever the list price is, look at houses that have been on the market for a long time, right? So talk to your real estate agent and ask the question, how long has the house been on the market? Because if you think about it, if I'm selling my house and I've been on the market for a long time, I'm getting a little nervous or anxious, or maybe I have to move because my job is going to move me, or maybe whatever was causing me to want to move is probably getting a little tighter. So I'm going to be more likely to take less money for the house. But if the house just went on the market 2 days ago, you probably don't want to lowball them, right? So make sure you're asking, or you can even check if you're looking at houses yourself on sites like Zillow or Redfin or anything like that. You can see how many days it's been on the market. So when you understand the days on the market, it'll give you an idea of how you can negotiate. The second thing we want to look at, we want to know here, is writing an offer versus being in contract, right? At each point in the transaction, real estate agents don't really like when I share this, okay? So if you're a real estate agent on this call, just like cover your ears, or maybe it's a good time to go to the restroom. But if you're someone who's not a real estate agent, this is really good, all right? So when you write an offer, you want to give the seller whatever they want. That's when you give them their price, you give them their terms, all of that. When you go into contract, you have these contingency periods. It just means that you have like a due diligence period, right? Maybe 7 days, 10 days, 15 days. Within those contingency periods, you can go back and renegotiate. So let's say that you go into contract. I have one right now where the client went into contract for 935,000. They did their inspection and then they went back and said, Mr. Seller, the electrical is a little off. It's going to cost us about 15 grand to fix it. So we're going to ask you for a credit for $18,000. And most of the time at that point, the sellers don't want to go back on the market, right? Now, you want to ask for something reasonable. You don't want to ask for something like super unreasonable because they will tell you to go away, right? But something small like that, you could go back and negotiate. So sometimes you're going to give up a little bit in the beginning to go into contract, but once you're in contract, you can go back and renegotiate a little bit. Sorry if you're a real estate agent and you're on this call, I am giving away the secrets because that's what I promised that I would do. The second thing is you want to choose the right real estate agent. And a lot of times people think that they're going to get a better deal if they go directly to the real estate agent that represents the seller. They call it the listing agent. But if you think about it, the agent that represents the seller has a contract with the seller. They've known the seller longer than they've known you as the buyer. And if there's a dispute, who do they side with? Now, they might tell you that legally they can't choose a side and they're just going to relay information, but how do we really know that, right? So I always say make sure you have your real estate agent, somebody who's going to fight for you. Most of the time, you're going to get the seller to pay the real estate agent's commission, although it's negotiable. Most of the time, the sellers pay your real estate agent commission. So you may as well have somebody who's going to fight for you. And most of the time, that real estate agent is going to negotiate their own commission to be paid by the seller, right? So you want to have someone who's going to fight for you, that's going to ultimately look out for you, and they're not just looking out to make a deal. So I highly recommend that you find your own real estate agent. But by the way, when you're ready for a real estate agent, there's a lot of bad ones. And again, if you're a real estate agent on here, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of bad real estate agents because the barrier of entry to become a real estate agent is relatively low and the commissions are relatively high. So a lot of people come into the market to make a quick buck, but most realtors are not very good. And you can look up their numbers and see how many homes they sell, how active they are. But when you're ready for a real estate agent, I actually have like a list of real estate agents that I've worked with before that I know do a really good job for clients. I know they're going to look out for you and ultimately they're going to negotiate really well for you. So when you're ready for that, let me know and I'll connect you. Cool. Is this helpful so far? Let me know in the chat if it's helpful while I take a sip of water. I talk too much, so I need some water here. If it is helpful, let me know in the chat. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. And then we'll answer all questions. And also, too, If you have a question and you don't want to ask it in the chat because you're shy, Valerie will put a link in the chat for my calendar, and you can book a meeting with me. We can ask just like a call, not even a meeting, where we'll just go over any of your questions, and we'll make it happen there. It's a very informal meeting, by the way. Sometimes I take those while I drive, or while I walk the dog, or while I'm having lunch, or whatever the case may be. But you can book a meeting there. All right. No questions in the chat yet. Cool. So the next thing we want to do, or the second secret, is if you're preparing to buy a house, the next thing we want to do is we want to optimize your credit. Credit scores are super important. Think of your auto insurance. If I'm someone who drives recklessly, I have some tickets, maybe a DUI, I can still get insurance, but it's going to be really expensive. Same thing happens in mortgages. If I have bad credit, if I have a low credit score, chances are I can still get a mortgage, but it's going to be really expensive. So in order to get the best mortgage possible, we want to optimize your credit, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to look at your credit report and make sure there's no errors on it. Sometimes there's errors, there's mistakes, right? Sometimes little things happen that they can fix. I'll tell you, about a month ago, my son has a credit card that we gave him, a credit card that we don't use. And 6 months ago, he used the credit card because I don't know why he decided to use the credit card, but it was 10 bucks. And I didn't even know that we owed money to that credit card. So for like 5 months, the credit card kept reporting late on my credit. And it wasn't until Experian sent me an email saying that I had a late payment that I realized we haven't paid this $10 bill, and it turned into a $60 late fee and all of that mess. But I was able to call Capital One. They realized that the credit card is never used. They realized that all my credit cards that I have with them are on auto pay, and they actually removed the late fee and removed the ding from my credit report. So sometimes just asking the credit cards to do you a solid, they'll do it. It's probably going to take my credit score back up. I haven't checked it again, but it was a really easy call. It was time consuming, but it was a really easy call. The second thing you want to do is make sure that your credit card balances are no more than 30% of the limit, right? Because basically what they're doing is if your credit cards are maxed out, the bureaus believe that you're having financial trouble, and they'll lower your score in an attempt to warn other creditors not to lend you more money. Now, sometimes people say, well, every month at the end of the month, I pay the credit card off in full. So the trick here is you want to see your credit card statement and see when does the statement close. Every time you look at the statement, it says like closing statement date. Let's say that the closing statement date is on October 20th, or it was September 20th of last month. Now, we know that it's going to close on the 20th. So what we want to do is we want to pay the credit card off 3 days before the closing statement. That way they process it, they lower your balance, and when the statement goes out, it shows the lower balance due. The balance due on the day of the statement is the same balance that gets reported to the credit bureaus. So you can kind of trick the bureaus to giving you a higher score, even though you're using the credit cards all the time. Cool. Does that make sense? Let me know if that makes sense. All right. The next thing to do is sometimes people say, well, that's cool, but what if I have credit card debt that I need to get rid of? Right? So we play this game called the debt snowball method. Now, a lot of times when you go to like financial people, they tell you that you want to take the credit card with the highest interest rate and pay that one first. But I find that that kind of becomes a little bit of a drag. I found that this way works a little bit better because there's something that it does psychologically for you, but it's called the debt snowball method. Here's what we do. We take all of the credit cards and we list them from the biggest on top to the smallest on the bottom, right? And let's say that that smallest one you owe $100 and it has a minimum payment of $50 a month. Well, you're going to take all the money that you have and you're going to pay off that little credit card. And now it's going to free up that $50 for next month. So next month you take that $50 and you apply to the next one. And then that's going to grow and that's going to grow and that's going to grow. So eventually you have this big amount of cash flow that you're using to attack the credit card with the biggest balance. They call it the debt snowball method. I've seen people do this and save tons of money because every time you pay a credit card off, it feels good, right? You get like that little dopamine hit, like, all right, I paid off the credit card. So you just want to keep doing it. Where if you're just attacking the one with the highest interest rate, yeah, it might work out, but you don't get that same like happy feeling that you do when you have a zero balance on that credit card. Does that make sense? Let me know if that makes sense, if anybody wants to participate with me. The next thing you want to do to set yourself up is you want to get what we call a full loan approval. See, a lot of times people go to the bank or a credit union and they get pre-qualified. And a pre-qualification is cool, but it still tells the sellers and the agents that there's more work to be done. An underwriter hasn't looked at it. Sometimes these credit unions will even give you a pre-qualification letter without even looking at your income. We had a client like that. They came to us for a second opinion, and when we looked at their paperwork, I was like, dude, who gave you this pre-qual letter? And it turns out that the person who gave them the pre-qual letter didn't run their credit. They didn't look at their income. They went based off what the person said. And I'll tell you, after doing this for 23 years, 99% of the time, the income that you tell me you make is not the same as what the income that the underwriter will calculate, right? Because sometimes there's overtime, sometimes the hours fluctuate, sometimes there's vacation, holidays. So the way that we calculate income is kind of tricky. You want to make sure that you have a full approval. And what that does for you is when you write an offer and the listing agent and the seller see that you have a full approval, it actually increases your negotiating power. And I've seen people where they write offers and they're not even the highest offer, but the listing agent will tell us the reason why we took your offer is because you were fully approved and we knew that it was pretty much a done deal to work with you versus working with someone who was not fully pre-approved. What it also does is when you're fully approved, it allows you to compete with cash investors. We have a transaction right now where we wrote an offer on a 14-day escrow because we know that the client's already fully approved and we were competing with other people. But because we had a short escrow, they gave it to us after some negotiations. Cool. So make sure that whoever your lender is, hopefully it'll be me. But if you choose not to go with me, totally cool. I'm still your friend and you can still come to all my workshops. But whoever your lender is, make sure that they're going to do a full approval for you so they set you up in a position where you have the best negotiating power. Cool. The next thing we want to do, and this is my favorite thing, like mortgage payments are high right now, right? Most people are not paying the same amount of rent that they're going to pay in their mortgage, meaning that your mortgage is going to be more than your rent. So we call this test driving your new payment. So let's say that your new mortgage payment is going to be $5,000 and your current rent is $3,000. So right now you're used to paying 3,000, but now you're going to make a jump to 5,000. So what you want to do is you want to test drive that payment. And what we mean by that is you're going to pay $5,000 starting now. You're going to take the normal 3,000 and pay it to your landlord the way you normally would. And then the other 2,000 you're going to put away in a high interest savings account. Sometimes a good financial planner can give you a short-term account with like a 4.5% return. My financial planner right now has a 4.5% return, and it's a short-term like no risk account. Like you're not going to lose any money in the market. It's just a high yield savings account because the rates are high right now, so they're giving you a high return. By the way, if you want an introduction to my financial advisor, let me know in the chat and I'll make an introduction. Or if you got an email from me, just reply to the email and say, hey, please connect me with your financial advisor, and I'll connect you with Tracy. She's really, really good and she knows all about this stuff, right? So this test drive the payment, it does two things. Number one, it helps you save money in that high yield savings account. But the second thing that it does, it lets you take that payment for a test drive. So you can see like, okay, $5,000 is a walk in the park. Let's keep going. Now I can go and commit to that mortgage. Or you might think $5,000 is a little bit higher than I'm comfortable with. Let's just stay with it's something a little bit lower, right? Or you might think, hey, I can go to 6,000. And then maybe you test drive that 6,000 for a couple of months. Whatever that is, test driving the payment is one of the smartest things that I've seen people do. There's so many benefits to it. Let me take a look at the chat here. Gina says, yes, yes, that would be awesome. Uh, I see, yes, yes, that would be awesome, but I honestly forgot what I asked. Thank you all for participating, but somebody, will you let me know what you said yes to? Or what you're saying yes to. I appreciate you all. Cool. All right, now let's go to the next secret. Secret number 3. Use the programs even if you don't think you need them. There are so many programs right now. Now, most people or some people won't qualify for all the programs, but some people will qualify for them, right? But you want to look at the programs. Right now, there's over 70 different programs available for buyers. There are some programs that are from the cities, there are some programs that are from the county, and then there's some programs that are from the state of California, like we mentioned, that Dream for All program. And by the way, if you want to learn about programs, I do a workshop like this. It's on Zoom also, called How to Buy a House with Government Programs. If you want to come to that, send me an email and let me know, and I'll invite you to the next one. I think the next one is going to be in a couple of weeks. And it's very similar to this on a Zoom, but it's basically where we break down all the different programs and what it takes to qualify for them. And we basically give you like a step-by-step plan on how to get into those programs. Cool. Now, use the programs even when you don't think you need them. And my favorite example of that is Jonathan and his car payment. So Jonathan came to us and they had about 50 grand for their down payment, like 50 grand for their down payment and closing costs, which is a good down payment, right? Their down payment for them was going to be about 30,000. And initially their monthly payment was going to be about $4,600 a month. That's what they could afford. But the house that they really wanted, the payment was going to be about 5,100. But they didn't want to overextend themselves, right? That's a $500 difference. But what we noticed is that they had a car payment that was $700 and the balance on that car payment was $12,000. So that means that if we had an extra 12 grand, we can pay off the car. And here's what we did. We took this down payment assistance program that gave them 12 grand. And we took the 12 grand and applied it to their down payment. So the money that they had for their down payment and closing costs, it freed up $12,000. So they paid off the car. So now, since they don't have that $700 car payment, they were able to pay a little bit more on the mortgage and they bought the house they really wanted. They got the extra bedroom and they just because they went to that house, they were in a better school district for their kids, which was ultimately what they wanted was a better school district and the second bedroom. So if we had not been creative with the program, they would have still bought a house. And I think buying a house is great, but they would not have bought the house that they really wanted. They would have been somewhere else. Right. So again, make sure that the loan officer you work with is familiar with the programs because most loan officers don't know these programs. A lot of times these programs are really tricky. The guidelines are not easy to fit into. And there are some rules, right? You have to have your credit score has to be pretty good and your debt to income ratios have to be pretty good. But the good thing is that if you're starting to plan right now, then this would be a good time to start to look at what those guidelines are and then starting to see how we can set you up so that you fit in that little box when the time comes. Is that fair? Is this helpful? Let's look at the payments because people always ask, like, what's the payment? So I put together this little chart. If you bought a house for $500,000, your down payment on that, this is on an FHA loan. Now, for you, if you have really good credit, these numbers might be a little lower. If your credit's not so good, these numbers might be a little higher. Okay, so if you want an actual, like, let's see what it looks like for me. Go ahead and book a strategy call, and we can crunch some numbers based on your scenario. But just to give you an idea, if you bought a house for 500,000, you'd be looking at a monthly payment of about $3,980, so about $4,000. And if you bought a house for $1,000,000, you'd be looking at a payment of about $7,800. Now, sometimes people say, well, who buys those houses? It's crazy, but a lot of people do. And if you want to know what kind of income you need in order to do that, I put this up as well. So if you bought a house for $500,000 and your payment was $3,980, you would need to make about $8,900 a month in order to qualify for it. So in order to buy that $1,000,000 house, you would need to make about $17,000 a month. Now, $17,000 a month is just a little over $200,000 a year. So if you and your partner each make about 100 grand, it works. If you're making a little bit less, then you might want to look at something a little bit lower. But it's very feasible, and we see it happen all the time. So it's not as difficult. Does anyone have questions on these payments? Let me check the chat here. All right, please connect me with Tracy. Yes, if you can send me, I'll put my phone number on here. If you can send me a text message, I'll send you an introduction to her tomorrow. 727-8533. I just put my phone number on there, and Tracy I'll send you, if you send me a text message with your email, I'm sure I have your email because you registered for this, but I'll know who to introduce Tracy to, and we'll get you all set. Very cool. Anyone have questions on these numbers? No? All right, this one's been an easy class. So if you want to book a call, if you have any questions, or if you're like, hey, let's get started, let's put a plan together so that we can buy a house, there's a QR code there where you can book a call with me. Again, the call is very informal. We're just going to have a conversation about your stuff. If it makes sense for us to move forward, then we can do something a little bit more formal where we'll get together, or maybe we'll do a Zoom, or we'll do something that's a little bit more formal for you. Cool. I'll leave that on there. And then Valerie will put it in the chat for us as well, so that if you can't take a picture of that because you're on Zoom on your cell phone, you can also just click the link. Jamila says, I book a call with you next week. Awesome. I look forward to talking with you then.